Last year, I walked up 13 flights of stairs every single day. Not for exercise, but to avoid the elevator. Has anyone ever taken the long way around something, not because it was better, but because something about the short way scared you? For me, taking the elevator scared me. And this elevator is in the building Hong Kong Polytechnic University, where I was getting my master's degree. And in this program, the majority of my classmates were from mainland China, and they spoke Mandarin. Now, although I had lived in Shanghai for most of my life and learned to speak the language there, I had forgotten a lot of it ever since I moved abroad to study in the US for college. So as you can imagine, every time that I did try to talk to my classmates in my broken Mandarin, I was often met with a funny look. And then they would proceed to either say something quickly to wrap up the conversation or awkwardly laugh and then turn to talk to their neighbor on their left. Because of this, I felt a deep sense of disconnect with my peers and a little ashamed that I can't even speak the language of where I'm from. So when I say that I was scared to take the elevator, what I mean to say is that I was afraid of embarrassing myself. And since then, I have come to reflect a lot on this idea of embarrassment and how the fear of it shapes so much of my actions and my behaviors. And I think a lot of us here today can agree that we would go to great lengths just to avoid this feeling of embarrassment. Sometimes lengths even more extreme than 13 flights of stairs, I imagine, maybe. But today I want to make the case that embarrassment isn't something to have to survive. In fact, it's something we should be seeking out. And the funny thing about embarrassment is that it doesn't actually exist without an audience. Because I can make the exact same mistake completely alone and not feel embarrassed at all. But the moment that those elevator doors open and everyone looks up, suddenly it becomes a performance, and nobody wants to perform badly. But this also means that embarrassment was never about the mistake itself, it's about being witnessed making one. And what's interesting to me about that is that we spend so much time trying to constantly manage how others see us, while the person watching us most closely, most critically, is almost always ourselves. And this idea made me think of something else, something that gave me permission to get back on that elevator. And psychologists call this the spotlight effect. And what the spotlight effect is that it is our tendency as humans to consistently overestimate how much we're being noticed, observed, and judged. There was a study done at Cornell University where they had participants wear these embarrassing t-shirts, super uncool t-shirts. And those same participants believed about half the people in the room had noticed they were wearing this t-shirt. Whereas in a survey conducted afterwards, they found that the actual number was closer to about a quarter. And so what this tells me is that every time that I believed classmates or that I was a little bit weird or different, half the time they were probably thinking of something else. So I tested this. I got back on the elevator. I started talking to my classmates again in my broken Mandarin. And something unexpected happened. Even when they didn't fully understand me, they understood I was trying. They saw that I was strong in English and honest about where I struggled. Other classmates who would overhear this started to seek me out. They wanted help with their English. They invited me to join their group projects. And in return, they've helped me find my way back to a language that I thought I'd lost. And what once started as a school year that I had dreaded now became something that I actually looked forward to. Not because I stopped making mistakes, but because I stopped treating my mistakes as something to hide. And this is what showing up imperfectly did for me. It didn't repel people, it actually invited them in. And so this shift in mindset really helped me to reframe how I approached these uncomfortable situations. And there were 3 things that I did in particular throughout this journey that really helped me with this shift. And I encourage anyone here to try these as well. And those 3 things are: number 1, return to something that you used to do without self-consciousness. Think of one thing that you did as a kid that you really enjoyed doing. And not necessarily because you were good at it, but because you truly liked it. You know, as kids, we used to play and laugh with very little concern of what others thought. But as we've grown older, many of us have lost this childlike ability to be able to play and be fearless in the face of judgment. So when we revisit that one thing, we can maybe start to remember how it feels to be able to play and create and do things for ourselves without an obligation to fulfill any sort of external obligation. Next, number 2. Do one thing this week that has a high chance of going awkwardly. And I know this one is hard, but start a conversation in an elevator. Sing in public. The goal here isn't success. It's practicing the experience of being witnessed doing things imperfectly and being open-minded about the outcome. If it goes well, great. If not, that's not failure. That's still valuable data that also drives growth. And in doing this, we can start to learn how to be ready for anything rather than preparing for everything. And that to me just seems like a much more manageable task. Lastly, number 3, when you wake up in the morning and you're getting ready to start your day, I want you to try and do something a little bit different, a little bit imperfect or out of the ordinary to your outfit or your overall appearance. Maybe you have mismatched socks on, maybe you have a red sock, green sock, maybe you leave a button unbuttoned on your shirt, not your pants. I want to make that clear. Please button your pants. Or maybe your hair's a little messier that day. Maybe you didn't brush your hair. And what you might find is that when you're walking down the street, people might not take much note of these tiny details as much as you thought they would. And the more that I did this, the more that this constant need of trying to manage how I'm being seen all the time started to slowly fade away. So what if embarrassment is proof of growth, not evidence of failure? What if it means that you showed up, you tried, you were visible, and that visibility is exactly what growth requires? And what if it means learning to be a beginner again? So here's what I want to leave you with. That version of ourselves that we each want to be, whether that's being more confident, more connected, more fluent in whatever your equivalent of Mandarin is. That version of you isn't waiting on the other side of a perfect performance, but on the side of a willingness to be seen getting it wrong. I still walk a lot of stairs, but now it's because I like the view from the top, not because of who I'm afraid I'll meet on the way up. My name is Kelly. Thank you for listening.